HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Visit a farm. Log on to escapemaker.com for more ideas on local weekend getaways and day trips to orchards, farms, wineries, breweries, and more. Get out of the city and explore while also supporting your local farmers. Log on to escapemaker.com now to get inspired and make your escape through the net.
I'm Damon Bolte, host of The Speakeasy. You're listening to Heritage Radio Network, broadcasting live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. If you like this program, visit heritageradionetwork.org for thousands more.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Heritage Radio Network. We are coming to you, as always, from the back of Roberta's Pizza here in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And you, of course, have tuned into the Farm Report. I'm your host, Erin Fairbanks. And today we are going to be zooming out a little bit, talking about some big stuff here in the U.S. We are just days away from a very big presidential election. And many people in food and farming have been curious about how the candidates, whoever wins on November 8th, will impact food, farming, and all the things that are tangential to that. And to help us think a little bit more about this and what it entails, we've asked a longtime friend of the network, former co-host of the Farm Report, John Wilkes, to join us. John, how are you?
I'm very well, Erin. How are you?
I am great. So, John, you have been working in agriculture on a national and international stage for a number of years, and recently did a discussion on the same topic for another well-known radio station, the BBC, the British Broadcasting. And we're really excited and flattered to have you here to help us understand a little bit about what we should be thinking about. So I thought I'd kick it off by having you lay a little bit of the groundwork for us. What should we be thinking about? What are the kind of big questions, concerns, and things that you're seeing from where you sit?
Well, as you say, there was this big forum last week. Excuse me, a big forum last week here in D.C. where each party put a candidate forward, and they were able to, state the case for both sides. And from the Clinton camp, it was interesting. Kathleen Merrigan, who's a former Undersecretary of Agriculture and Director of Sustainability at George Washington, she spoke on behalf of the Clinton side of things. And basically, she had a top 10 priority list. So from the Clinton perspective, there was a list of 10 rural priorities for Hillary Clinton were she to be elected. And I'll run through those in a minute. And then on the other side, they had Sam Clovis, who's a professor of economics at Morningside, and he's the co-chair and policy advisor for the Trump campaign. So going back to the Clinton side, she had a list, and she did a David Letterman in reverse order, in particular order. But I suspect there was, maybe you'll see when we get to the top end of the list. So starting out, clean energy was a big issue for the Clinton campaign. She hopes to have, I think, 500 million solar panels before the end of her first term in place. So that the rural states would lead on that. and also with the bio-base and biodiesel for sustainable and renewable energy. Immigration reform, they feel that there needs to be immigrants coming to this country to work because without full immigration, a lot of the crops won't get picked, and it won't be good for U.S. ag, and there'll be more imports. And in fact, she plans to put into place a pathway to full citizenship to be introduced in her first 100 days, which was interesting. And beginning farmers and ranchers, looking for help for them, farm support. Rural broadband, that was an interesting one. That's where both sides agreed. And also, technically number 9 position was rural substance abuse, which was interesting. Between 1999 and 2009, the rural death rate grew by 400%. So that's a biggie. Yeah, I mean, you just don't think of that. And this was across all sort of sections of society in the rural area and age groups, demographics. That was fascinating. But the number one, and she stressed this, her number one was the woman's card, because women are the head or co-heads of many farms in the U.S., a third of all operations. And she said by 2030, women may own as much as 75% of all transferred land here because they outlive their husbands. So that was interesting. And so quickly on the other side, obviously for the corporate tax for the Trump side was very important, that they want to cut corporate tax to 15%. And also that the death tax too, the implications for farmers trying to pass on, the farm to their siblings, to their kids. That was a biggie. And also, but the big one really is this idea of government overreach on the western on the western rangelands for livestock producers and the energy companies. I have 13 western states. I think the federal government owns 20% of the land, and in Nevada it's 80%. So we've seen some of this, the sort of the way that's been resisted, and land management issues. He felt that Trump feels there should be a balance between preserving habitat and not over in favor of EPA. And then obviously immigration is huge for Mr. Trump, and 1 in 4 agricultural workers in the U.S. are actually illegal. So then they want to reform immigration, and the workers are coming in, doing the job, and doing it all legally. So, I mean, that's a quick snapshot of some of the stuff.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting because obviously a lot of those kind of, the top 10 or the top list, if you will, are really, frankly, in line with a lot of stuff you've been hearing from both of the campaigns throughout this election cycle. Yeah. With kind of a pivot to look specifically at agriculture and food production. So kind of setting politics aside for just a second, I mean, what were kind of your reactions? What were things that jumped out at you as you were like, yes, that's like smart, I get that, or no, I like that's just like taking us down the wrong path? From just kind of your experience, did you have strong reactions in either direction? Yeah.
From my perspective, the big one, as we all know at the moment, is trade, is TPP. I mean, that is the biggie. Obviously, there's issues around other stuff, but TPP, particularly, I mean, I look a lot into the livestock industry in the U.S. here, and so for the livestock industry, if President Obama isn't able to get TPP.
John, let's just take a pause there quickly, and if you can kind of break down for folks in broad strokes.
I will tell you exactly. Yeah. TPP is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is a 12-nation trade deal that includes the U.S. It includes Australia also, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam. That's 500 million, mostly affluent customers, of which that's 40% of the whole world's GDP. So this is a trade deal that's been crafted between the U.S. and those 12 nations. We do already trade with 4 or 5 of them anyway. We've got bilateral agreements. But the U.S. livestock industry, I feel, and they're really fighting to save this. I mean, it's worth potentially an extra $4.4 billion annually in extra income for U.S. farmers if it were to go through. And I know that the beef and the pork sectors are both calling it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I make no comment. I'm just, it's my thoughts on speaking to the farming people here in D.C. on
Sure.
the bodies.
So wait, that extra income is because they are getting new customers or because they're getting a higher price on things that they're currently selling? Like, where does that extra income come from?
The income will come from things like trade tariffs, in reduced trade tariffs.
Got it. Okay.
And that it'll be a level playing field with, for example, in the beef and to a lesser extent sheep industry, but the beef's the big one. Australia are very much in the forefront and in the driving seat on this. And, it's worth a lot of money. I was talking with Colin Woodall. I did send you I don't know whether it worked, but I spoke with Colin Woodall afterwards, who's VP for Government Affairs at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And he pointed out their industry is losing $400,000 a day as a result of not being in, having the TPP agreement on the statute book and being able to use it. It's big chunks of change. And it's big money, Erin. If you look at Japan alone, Japan is the biggest market for U.S. pork, beef, corn, and wheat. Okay, it's the biggest market. It takes, I think, about nearly 1.28 billion of beef a year and 2 billion worth of pork. So
Wow.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
It's huge. But just zeroing in on the beef side, Australia have an agreement, a bilateral agreement with Japan, where they see a tariff on Australian beef going into Japan of 27.5%. This is going to drop. It's going to drop down to 19%, in increments.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. tariff is 38.5%. So that's a huge difference between between what the Australians are enjoying and what the U.S. beef industry is currently enjoying. So you can understand, in a way, why it's important. So I think TPP was the big thing that jumped out, and regulation too. I think the issues with regulation were it was big. Trump wants to deregulate. He wants to sort of regionalize policy, whereas for Hillary Clinton, they very much feel that regulations are important. And that it needs to be in place because otherwise it's not going to. I don't know. It's hard to really get it over. The fact that regulations from Clinton's point of view level the playing field, and they give certainty to business and build trust, and also they get the confidence of the American public. And if they can get a standard in place. Kathleen Merrigan highlighted the organic standard a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There was varying standards of organic, and then they stepped in to create a policy for organic, which everybody could work to.
So I feel like it's kind of my general impression is that historically, I think specifically looking maybe from like the mid 1950s to now, that the federal government has always had a big hand in our ag and food policy, really shaping kind of what's growing here, the pricing systems, how it's exchanged. And so there's like the kind of like regulatory and shaping environment, looking at the involvement of government has always been, pretty significant. And I think that's reflective of the fact that food, and food access and food security is, really a basic human need. Do you think do you have a sense of compared to other kind of industries when we're just thinking about kind of level of involvement of government that food and ag have, more attention potentially, or not really?
Well, I think yes, because I think obviously it's for food production. A lot of it is the public health side of things. It's the health of the people who's involved with agricultural production, and that's why in any country, back in the UK, it's the same. The government agricultural side of things are very much involved with food production because of safeguards being put into place for the public. But I mean, it's interesting. There's the Trump side want to cut regulatory regimes. They want to make smaller enterprises more competitive. And it's interesting. There's a parallel between this and the Brexit that we had in the UK, where UK farmers felt a move away from the EU would also free up, them and have less red tape. Mm-hmm. Which is, as an ex-farmer myself, although a few years ago, even then there were so many rules and regulations, and I think that is the driver. And you could argue, so the Clinton side are arguing these regulations are good in relation to public health and public safety, and the Trump view is they want to simplify stuff so that there is less burdensome regs for farmers.
Sure. And I'm sure probably, there's a middle way that probably makes the most sense. It's interesting that the death tax was on Trump's hit list. I think that is a real issue facing a lot of farmers across the country, where essentially your biggest asset, your retirement plan is the land and the infrastructure on your farm. But how to extract, money to kind of pay the bills and buy groceries in retirement without selling the land or having the land be transitioned into non-agriculture use or being able to pass it on to the next generation. Those are really kind of complex and urgent issues because, once farmland is lost to development, I always say, no one's plowing down strip malls and housing developments to put up farms.
No. Yeah, what is it Mark Twain said? Is it land? They don't make it anymore. It's a finite resource. On the Clinton side, she did say that were she to form an administration, that they're really going to try to find a way to pass on the farm, basically, without crippling taxes. Mm-hmm. And I think their idea is to maybe offer more help with estate planning, mm-hmm. To make farmers able to find ways to ensure that their children and farms can be passed down the line to people. So I think that may be something that they would be looking at is more help with estate planning, which of course is pretty basic to all this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, then too, thinking kind of again in that in the context of transition, looking at issues specific to women in agriculture, and I think the U.S. is I feel like just the sheer aspect of measuring women in farming positions is a relatively kind of new concept for a U.S. ag census, and acknowledging these issues is still a really new kind of topic of discussion, and thinking about, even though obviously women have been playing a really strong role in farms and farm businesses forever, frankly.
Yeah, and as I say, it's interesting that, well, not interesting, it makes a whole lot of sense that Hillary Clinton's is latched onto this. And she mentioned, she talked about women in farming globally, because globally, female farmers are 50% of agricultural labor, if you look across globally. And 2/3, I think there's something like 600 million livestock farmers, and 2/3 of them are women globally.
Wow.
So these are numbers which Kathleen Merrigan came up with, and it did in the room. I mean, the room was packed with ag media, because it's the first opportunity really for both sides to lay out any idea of policy, and I think it really did resonate with the assembled media and ag bodies. And interestingly, I just saw the other day there is a list of 5 potential, were Hillary Clinton to become to form an administration. I think of the 5 people put up for agriculture secretary, I think two are women, of which Kathleen Merrigan is one, and I forget the name of the other lady. So it's a good thing.
Well, yeah, putting people in leadership positions to shape those policies. I'm wondering if we could talk just a little bit more on this topic and clarify a little bit for folks when we're thinking about women's issues in agriculture. What are some of the things that would fall under that umbrella? Well,
I mean, as she intimated, obviously, women will inherit, will have the most land because often, the husband dies first, so it will then pass to the wife to take it forward. But I think it's the overall role that women can bring that. On farms, women do so much, and they're integral to many farming operations. But both in practical daily terms and also, I think she pointed out that doing the book work and doing a lot of the books and the running the numbers. So I think it will be very good for U.S. agriculture to recognize this, and there was no real talk of any definite initiatives or support, but I think the recognition of it alone
as an issue, well, yeah, that is definitely like a starting point. I mean, kind of acknowledging that there's a conversation to be had here, and I think some of the stuff comes a little bit more urgently into focus if you look at things from a global perspective, where you're looking at women's kind of legal rights and kind of cultural implications with regards to access to capital and cash and ownership and transfer. And I think there's many parts of the world where just really basic human rights are not something that women enjoy. And I think that obviously
yeah, I mean it's a big issue, and I think in many places in the world, women aren't. I think their role in agriculture maybe is some way down the line in relation to just, as you say, basic human rights and their ability to have fairness within society. So, but to recognise it here. What starts here, other countries, other nations may look at this.
Yeah, people look at the U.S. for thought leadership on these issues, and so one of the other issues that you talked about that I want to explain a little bit more for folks, because I feel like, especially if you're like myself, an urban resident, the idea of access to broadband, so we're talking about internet access, that in many ways feels like a basic human right in the U.S. And on some levels, it's hard to imagine, we get annoyed, by having like a moment of slowness with uploads on our kind of mini computers. But I wonder if you can talk, if you know at all, about kind of the state of broadband service in rural areas and why this is an issue that is going to make someone's top 10 list.
Well, I think the idea behind, and from both, and I have to say in fairness, there was agreement from both sides on this. The kids won't come home without Wi-Fi. So, and it sounds in some ways a sad thing to say, but for a lot of kids, it's so integral now. Their thumbs are glued to their iPhones that, if you're trying to persuade your son or daughter to come home to the farm and there's no Wi-Fi, that could be an issue. And they, as I say, both sides recognise that. But more importantly, I think they're going to move on this in a big way, because it's not just the iPhone and using it's about many high technology on farms now needs internet and Wi-Fi. Communication between the grain trailer to the elevator, between recording systems for sort of fairly intensive commercial agriculture need Wi-Fi to be able to take the recorded data to a central point on the farm. And so I got the sense they were both going to work on it. I actually was speaking with a current Undersecretary of Agriculture not that long ago, this is her field specific is the area of rural broadband and improving it. And she was saying that they really are taking this seriously, and they're looking to invest in it, because they can see on several levels the importance of communication within the rural community.
Yeah, sure. And I think, folks who, farming, as we talked about at the top of the show, using, numbers that begin with a B, it is a big and increasingly kind of sophisticated, high-tech, analytic-driven business. And I think government involvement with regards to broadband access is a thing that really makes sense, because obviously in these rural areas, if I'm looking at, sending out cables and building infrastructure for that, there's not a customer base there that's going to help me recoup my investment, and yet, like, deciding that access to that is something that is integral to, like, success of those regions. It makes a lot of sense. It's, I think, one of those interesting spaces around where you need a federal policy to make sure that, like, folks have access, where we're just kind of letting businesses kind of like make those decisions. Like it makes sense. Like, a town of 300 is not going to pay the bills essentially to build out that infrastructure. But
well, no, as you say, but I think that they are, under the Obama administration, they have been working on it. But I given the sort of the place in the list, as it were, I think for both sides, also for a Trump administration, it would be the same. It would be the same, that they are going to really look at this, because as I say, it is so integral nowadays. It's things change so rapidly, and the young expect it. It isn't something that they think they should have, that they expect it, and without that, you're going to have problems within the rural community of keeping these kids back.
Yeah, which you need to do. You can't run a farm without someone, without a farmer, essentially.
No, indeed. Farmers are a very, very valuable commodity.
John, we are going to just take a quick commercial break to hear from our awesome sponsors, Escape Maker, and we will continue this discussion in just a moment. So, folks, hang tight. You, of course, are listening to the Farm Report on the Heritage Radio Network.
And this one is called Snow Crash by RecTech. We'll be right back.
Visit a farm. Log on to escapemaker.com for more ideas on local weekend getaways and day trips to orchards, farms, wineries, breweries, and more. Or come by Escape Maker's Blue Tent and Grow NYC's Green Markets and pick up a guide to local agritourism escapes to the Green Market's own farmers and producers. Have you listened to On the Road with Beer Sessions Radio? Escape Maker has teamed up with Heritage Radio to design a vacation package that provides a first-hand experience of the local flavors from some of New York's best craft beverage producers. Listen in and book your trip at escapemaker.com/heritage radio. No car? No problem. Escape Maker features plenty of ideas for car-free getaways, including discounts via Amtrak. Get out of the city and explore, while also supporting your local farmers. Log on to escapemaker.com now to get inspired and make your escape through the net.
Oh, man, I love that tune. David, who was that again?
That was RecTech.
RecTech. Awesome. Well, we are back. You, of course, are listening to the Farm Report. I am your host, Erin Fairbanks. We are on the line with John Wilkes, and we are getting the download on our next potential president's positions as they relate to food production and agriculture in the U.S. and abroad. So one of the topics that fell on both sides of the aisle, of course, was immigration. It's been a big conversation in this campaign, and there are many spaces where these candidates are very different in opinion, and I think this is a big one. And maybe, John, you can lay out for us a little bit, what the difference of opinion is here, and what a immigration policy as it relates to agriculture might look like under Trump versus Clinton.
Yeah, well, as I intimated, Sam Clovis pointed out that 1 in 4 agricultural workers here are illegal, and he highlighted the need to that we do, immigration is necessary to be able to have these workers come in and do the job and then basically go home. And I think what was interesting from the Clinton perspective too, that they both agreed on this. And also, with Hillary Clinton looking to reform maybe in her first 100 days, the sort of process to allow this to occur, I think is really interesting. This idea of immigration and people working. I liken it back to the UK too. I mean, we need. There's a lot of people come in and do a job and then they leave, and I think it needs come in on a fixed contract, you do the job, and then you maybe leave. And I think both sides realize that needs to be worked out, and that they need to put legislation in place that people can come and work successfully and be employed and be looked after and do a good job, and then obviously they then return to their countries.
Yeah, and I think the important thing that really resonates with me personally is thinking about the safety and the treatment and of farm workers. I think we really need to make sure that the people who are picking and producing our food are able to have adequate housing, are able to be paid fairly for their work, are have access to medical care, have access to basic health services, and are able to kind of speak freely and get recompense if there's like something going on with their employer. And I think when you're working in your status as undocumented, you don't have a lot of resources to advocate for yourself, and that is a scary position. I know, on a very personal note, when I was working in upstate New York, definitely spent time with many folks who were here and working very hard in a series of dairy farms across Washington County, where there was no infrastructure in a protective way, and at the same time, I wouldn't turn around and point to any of the farmers that I knew and say like they were taking advantage of that system. But I think employers, what gets measured gets done, and employers, I think, need that structure, and workers need that protection. And it's it's scary to think about the opportunities for folks to kind of take advantage, and for that to end up kind of on our conscience as a country is a pretty dire and unfortunate thing.
It's a sad indictment, as they say. No, and I say, particularly from the Clinton side, they were, workers' rights and protection of workers' rights is linked to this issue. I mean, across the livestock sector, I know that there were issues a while back in the spring with the seasonal workers that come in to help out on the Western Rangelands with the U.S. sheep industry, and there were, and these people are vital. The skill in that sector, it's such a niche sector that these herders come in from Central and South America to work, because they have the skills that sadly aren't readily available, and so I think there's an aspect too that in certain sectors that these that people coming into work can bring in skill sets which maybe aren't prevalent here, and they need looking after. They need to be employed on decent contracts and have decent working conditions, because it reflects. I think it's more how it reflects also on industries that if workers are disgruntled and you haven't got a workforce that enjoys working for you, that's happy working for you, then the press is a very powerful thing these days, and it can get picked up and reflect badly on industries, and farming is no exception to that.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely a tendency towards salacious coverage in this industry, in this this part of the conversation in particular. And it's a complex thing because I think especially if you're looking at vegetable production, for example, at like smaller and medium scale farms, you are, as a producer, you have your entire kind of year's income is dependent on, these kind of critical control points where things are ready to get picked and sorted and washed and sent today, and dealing with kind of the employment realities of the long days that are needed when it's harvest season, balancing that with here in the Northeast where, in the winter there's totally different types of work to do, but also the volume, I think, really transitions. There's a real kind of pulsing nature to the needs of the space, and it falls a little outside of the way we think about employment protections in more traditional spaces, I think, and that becomes quite complicated, and I think really shaping policy in that space requires a lot of thoughtful nuance and experience and having the right stakeholders at the table to make sure that like all sides issues and like very real needs are being represented, because it's a complicated and kind of complex thing, and it's different from different types of, food production.
Indeed. I mean, as you say, the clue's in the word seasonal worker, isn't it? I mean, it's a seasonal vacation. You have a crop to gather, be it strawberries or berries or whatever, or something to pick, and you need that labour force for that, 3-month, 4-month period. So, and also the major organisations involved within the agriculture industry need to be consulted, but also that workers' rights are respected. I feel very strongly about that the rights of workers should be respected, and they should be employed in a fair manner and receive a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. And it's a big issue, and hopefully there seemed a will on both sides to. The emphasis, because immigration is a hot topic, but also to make it fair, to put some element of fairness to it, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we've done, and thank you so much for this, really well today, is really point out all of the different areas and ways that people can be thinking about, be active in, be getting involved in agriculture and the food movement. I think often when we think about policy, the conversation in the circles that I orbit, it really tends to be centered around thinking specifically about the Farm Bill, if we're thinking about things at a national level, or thinking about things at an incredibly kind of small-scale local level. And I think here, we've talked about energy reform, we've talked about integration, we talk about, technology and access and substance abuse and corporate tax policies and death tax. And, there's like so many ways that people can educate and advocate and get involved. But I think, one of the things that feels pretty clear to me personally is that, whatever your choices on November 8th, the policies put forth by both candidates have some overlap, but have some really significant differences. So it's an important decision that we'll all be making at the ballot box.
Indeed, and everybody's vote is important, because the right to vote is a wonderful thing, and everybody should exercise it, in my opinion.
So, John, for folks who want to kind of dig deeper into some of the stuff we talked about and learn more on these issues, anywhere in particular that you would direct them for kind of further learning? On TPP, you've only got to put TPP agriculture into Google, and you will have a wealth of latest articles and information about it. And obviously, on the USDA site, there is some of this stuff is available there. It can be a bit clunky and hard to navigate, but as I say, Google's a wonderful thing, and if you have an interest in any of the topics we've been talked about, I'm certain that further information, further details, and organizations and bodies that represent the industry, the National Pork Producers Council, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, just on the livestock side of things, they have very forthright views. If you go on their websites, you can hear how they feel about trade and that kind of thing. So just generally see what's out there. Have a play on Google, and you'll find all sorts of wonderful stuff. Yeah, and hopefully, we'll be hearing much more from, both candidates on their positions. It's nice to see it working its way into the national dialogue.
It was very pleasant, actually, because, after all vitriol and venom that's flying around at more senior levels within the party. It was conducted in a very sort of very nice way.
That is good to hear.
Yeah, I didn't have to wear a flak jacket at all. I was safe. Got out alive. It was wonderful. It was conducted in a very nice spirit, I have to say, and which is, in my opinion, by much the best way to get points over and to provide information is to just talk about it openly and without any kind of antagonism. And it was very telling, I thought, in this exchange between the two sides.
Good. Well, John, thank you so much for helping us understand a little bit more about the different candidates' positions. And it was such an interesting talk. I always love having you on. You give such a unique and thoughtful perspective. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I've managed to de-muddy the pond a bit, or maybe made it more muddy. But there's a lot of stuff in there, but it's a big topic. And as I say, everybody vote, because it's an important, it's a vital thing to do. So everybody vote. Everybody vote.
All right. Well, that is going to bring us to the end of our show today. Thank you so much for tuning into the Heritage Radio Network. If you like the program, if you believe in what we do, please consider becoming a member. You can do that by visiting our website, www.heritageradionetwork.org. Click that beating heart and throw us a couple of bucks. I would love to hear a little bit more about who you'd like to hear from on the Farm Report. Leave me a review on iTunes. Give me a shout out about what other topics or issues or people you'd like to see discussed here. And I'll be looking for that. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned in.
Thanks for listening to this program on heritageradionetwork.org. You can find all of our archived programs on our website or as podcasts in the iTunes Store by searching Heritage Radio Network. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at @heritage_radio. You can email us questions at any time at info@heritageradionetwork.org. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization. To donate and become a member, visit our website today. Thanks for listening.